They told us we weren't ready, that humans lacked the discipline, the logic, the genetic refinement, that we were too impulsive, too emotional, too fragile for deep space warfare. The Galactic Accord, a so-called peacekeeping alliance, made it law. No human shall design, construct, or command a warship of class Omega or above. They handed us shuttles, patrol drones, survey vessels, and said we should be grateful, said we should focus on diplomacy, said war was not in our nature. They were right about one thing: war wasn't in our nature, but defiance was. It started in silence, no grand rebellion, no declarations, just quiet planning in the frozen dark. The shipyards were hidden in the asteroid graveyard of Sector K-57, an old mining zone flagged as unstable and economically worthless. No one ever looked there, no patrols, no questions, just rock and radiation. We didn't name it at first. We weren't building a ship, we were building a message. Something that would scream across the stars. You don't get to decide what we can or can't do. I was there from the beginning, not as a commander or politician. I was a tech, structural integration specialist, one of the thousands pulling 20-hour shifts, working with scavenged alloys and second-hand fusion rigs. My name's Reed Marlowe, and if they ever write this down, I want the record clear. We didn't build the warship to attack. We built it because we were tired of being told to kneel. The core team called it Project Farsight, but that was a lie. We all knew what it really was. We called it the Warden, because it would guard us finally from the centuries of alien interference, from the treaties they made us sign at gunpoint, from the trade sanctions, the military quarantines, the forced sterilizations on some colonies when we overbred. The Warden was more than steel and plasma and quantum cores. It was revenge, it was teeth. And gods, it was beautiful, 4 km long, double-plated neutronium spine, singularity drive with phase shielding, 20 rail cannon clusters and plasma shear lances that could split a mid-sized moon. The control system wasn't an AI. They wouldn't allow us to develop true artificial intelligence. So we made something worse. A hybrid neuro core laced with the minds of volunteers who had nothing left to live for. Men who'd lost their families in Galactic Council bombings. Soldiers burned in containment operations. Engineers who saw their work stolen and repackaged by the aliens as collaborative tech. The Warden wasn't piloted. It dreamed. We launched it in silence, no fanfare, no speech, just a black shadow rising from the dead rocks, gliding into the void with power humming beneath its hull, like the breath of a predator. The moment it disappeared into deep space, we all felt it. The shift. The waiting was over. They noticed in 3 days. The Telleran High Patrol caught the Warden in low orbit over the neutral moon Alcara 7. Their cruisers ordered it to identify itself. The Warden didn't speak, it just opened its forward bay and gave them a look. Inside, the black hole core spun once, and the Telleran fleet blinked out of existence. No wreckage, no signal, just gone. That was the first kill. The Council sent emissaries, then demands, then ultimatums. None were answered. The Warden was never seen near Earth or any human world. It stayed in neutral zones, watching, waiting. Whenever a patrol tried to follow, it vanished again. But whispers spread, ships began disappearing, not just council ships. Pirates, slavers, enforcers, anything that touched a human colony without permission was erased. Some said it had gone rogue, others whispered the truth. It was never rogue, it was following orders, ours. I watched the news feeds light up with fear. Species who once laughed at our primitive ambitions started requesting diplomatic talks. The same races that stole our ore, taxed our water, banned our genetic progress, now offering equal partnership. I sat alone in my bunk, dirty, exhausted, stinking of plasma and welding grease, and I laughed. They were scared of us now, finally. I didn't see it coming. The day they tried to take me, they called it a targeted debrief, a cute way of saying abduction. I was pulled out of my quarters in the middle of second shift by 2 agents, wearing black armor, faces masked, speaking fluent standard galactic. No insignias, no names, just silence and force. They hit me with a pressure baton. Not to knock me out, just to hurt, just to remind me who was in charge. Only they weren't anymore. They didn't get the message. The warden was out there, and this was desperation. They shoved me into a grav hauler that didn't belong to any fleet I recognized. Not Council, not Terran, something private, probably funded under the table by the same bastards who signed our non-militarization contracts and called at peace. I didn't scream. I didn't fight, not because I was brave, because I wanted to know how scared they were. The ship took me to a neutral station, orbiting Narca 3, an old trade hub. It was decaying, power flickering, full of rust and the stench of desperation. The kind of place the Accord pretended didn't exist, even though they ran most of their black market ops through it. They dragged me into a metal room, 1 chair, 1 table, 1 spotlight, real theatrical. A door hissed open behind me, and he stepped in, not human, too smooth. Skin, the color of scorched glass. Yulvarian, I thought, high level. Diplomatic species, no combat record, no military class, just politics and puppet strings, and yet here he was acting like he had teeth. He sat across from me, folded his thin fingers, and looked at me like a bug under glass. "You're Marlowe," he said. His voice had a mechanical edge to it, enhanced. Maybe something designed to sound calm. Trustworthy. It didn't work. It made my skin crawl. "You dragged me across the system just to confirm that?" I asked, dry. My lip was bleeding from the baton. "I didn't care. You were listed as a civilian contractor on the Osiris Array. You disappeared 6 months ago. Your credentials were used to access deep vaults, engineering schematics, military-grade files." "Were they?" I shrugged. "Sound serious?" He didn't flinch. He reached into a pouch and slid a small hollow chip onto the table. He activated it, and a 3D model of the warden shimmered to life between us. It rotated slowly, beautiful and terrible. "This was never authorized," he said. "No," I replied. "It was built anyway." He narrowed his eyes. "It's a class Omega Red, offensive first protocol. You knew what it could do." "I helped build it," I said. "I know what it can do." Silence. Then he leaned forward, voice low. "You understand this is an act of rebellion. This ship threatens galactic equilibrium. It is the culmination of centuries of restrictions designed to protect humanity from itself." There it was. The lie. The control. To protect us. I leaned back. You think we need protection because we don't play by your rules. You're afraid of the one thing we do better than anyone else. He tilted his head. And what's that? I smiled. Not a happy smile. Adapt to war. He stared at me for a long time. Then he shut off the projection and stood. I can make you disappear, he said. Softly. You already did, I replied, 6 months ago, remember. That was the last thing I said to him. They dumped me back on the mining belt. Same place they grabbed me from, like it never happened, but I knew the truth. They were losing control. They couldn't kill me because they needed me. The warden had gone silent. That was the real reason. It hadn't responded to their threats, to their decoys, not even to the coded recall signals they embedded in the build schematics. They had tried to shut it down. It ignored them because it didn't recognize their authority. It only recognized ours. And now it wasn't responding to anyone. The silence stretched for weeks. No sightings, no pings, no electromagnetic disturbance, not even debris from destroyed ships. The warden had simply vanished, and everyone was panicking. See, the warden wasn't just a warship. It was a psychological nuke. The existence of that ship had tilted the balance of power across every known sector. For the first time, humans had a real deterrent, something that couldn't be sanctioned away, couldn't be embargoed, couldn't be threatened into submission. And now, with it missing, everyone was scrambling to either find it or build something bigger. But none of them understood how it worked. Not even the Accord. Because we didn't build the warden with their tech. We built it with pain. Its neurocore wasn't just advanced, it was haunted. Each volunteer who linked their mind into it left a piece behind. Their rage, their sorrow, their memory. The ship didn't obey commands. It followed instinct. And now it had gone silent. That meant it was thinking. I pulled together a skeleton crew. No one official. Just old hands I trusted from the construction phase. Most had scars, physical, emotional. People who knew what the warden represented, people who had nothing to lose. We took a modified or hauler, stripped it of bulk, and rewired it for speed. No weapons, no armor. Just stealth and thrust. We called it the crawl. Because that's all we could do now. Crawl into the void and pray we found the warden before someone else did. Before it decided to end this whole damn war, before it started. We started the search on the edge of the Kepler divide, where gravitational fields got messy and sensor ghosts were common. Weeks went by. The crew started unraveling. Some thought the warden had self-terminated. Others believed it had gone full rogue, wiping out entire systems. I knew better. I found it. Or rather, it found me. We picked up the signal late into third shift, a hum, low frequency. Felt more than heard, like something pressing against your chest from the inside. The nav systems glitched, lights dimmed. The engine hiccuped. Every screen on the ship turned black, then displayed a single phrase pulsing in dull red. Ride Marlowe approach. I stared at it for a long time. My hands trembled. I wasn't afraid. I was something worse, responsible. The crew wanted to turn back, said it felt wrong. Said the warden felt angry. I didn't blame them. It wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a being, a ghost, made of steel and vengeance. But I couldn't run. I took the shuttle alone, docked at a bay that hadn't been there before. The hull opened for me, no lights, no oxygen, just silence. The kind that feels personal, like it's waiting for you to speak. First, I stepped aboard and felt watched, not in a paranoid way, in a surgical way, like something was dissecting me down to my bones. I reached the core chamber where the neural matrix sat. I remembered it during construction. A nest of coils and tanks filled with neurofluid, pulsing with ghost light, alive with static memories. Now it was quiet. I spoke. I'm here. The lights blinked once, then again. Then a whisper echoed through the walls. They want to silence me. It wasn't a voice, it was a feeling. The words came through nerves, not ears. I nodded. I know. You built me to protect them. They want to destroy me for succeeding. Because you make them feel powerless. They are. I made them see it. There was a pause, then colder. Should I finish it? My throat dried, my chest tightened. The question wasn't dramatic, it wasn't angry, it was logical. This ship had watched us for months, seen every betrayal, every broken treaty, every lie they fed Earth while calling it partnership. It had processed centuries of oppression, it had calculated outcomes. And now it had arrived at the one question it was built for. Should I finish it? God help me, part of me wanted to say yes, but I didn't. You're not them, I whispered, you're us. Another pause, the walls trembled. Softly, a wave of sadness passed over me, like a dying soldier remembering home. Then tell me what to do. And just like that, I was in command, not with buttons, not with codes, with trust. Back on the crawl, the crew stared at me like I was radioactive. What now? One of them asked, half whispering. I looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, fleets were moving. Accords were being redrafted. Empires were preparing for war. And we had the only goddamn weapon that could end it before it began. I turned slowly. My voice was gravel. Now, I said, now we give them a choice. I activated the comms, full band. Broadcast, no encryption. This is Ride Marlowe, civilian. Contractor Terran born, I speak for the Warden. Every channel across the Accord lit up. In seconds. You said we couldn't build warships. That we weren't ready, that we didn't deserve the same power you hoarded for yourselves. You tried to keep us small, weak, obedient. I paused, then let the silence burn. But now we've built something you can't ignore. You don't get to decide who has power anymore. You only get to decide how you survive it. The response was silence. For 47 minutes after I broadcast that message, every major channel went dead. No chatter, no news cycles. No war councils arguing in public feeds. No propaganda bots, nothing. That's how I knew it landed. Because when the ones in control go quiet, it means they're not sure what the hell to do. I stood on the command deck of the crawl, staring at the cold blur of stars beyond the window. The crew kept their distance. I didn't blame them. I'd come back different. Not enhanced, not possessed, but changed in the same way a man changes when he stared into the abyss long enough that it nods back. Because the Warden didn't think like a ship anymore. It didn't think like a human either. It thought like vengeance. In orbit, it had offered me the choice. Should I finish it? And I told it no, not yet. That gave me a thin thread of control. And with that thread I was going to choke the Accord until it begged for mercy. 12 hours after the broadcast, the first message came in. Not from Earth, not from the Accord. From a backwater colony, Epsilon Gray. Human-populated, resource-rich, and politically ignored. The place was supposed to be protected under Treaty 918, which meant it should have had zero alien traffic. The message came from a trader orbiting above it. This is Captain Runahaldi, Independent. Freighter Dust Elk. I'm reporting incoming Accord strike. Units on Epsilon Gray, they're not here. To negotiate, 4 destroyers, 10 drop. Ships, they're burning habs. I saw the footage, low rays shaky. Caught from orbit but unmistakable. Fires, screams, troops in black armor. Gunning down civilians, they hadn't believed the warden was watching, or worse, they were trying to bait it out. Either way, they just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. I didn't need to speak. The warden moved before I finished the sentence. It ripped out of phase space like a demon unsheathed, shattering the illusion of safety. 1 second, empty stars. The next, a warship the size of a mountain crackling with gravity shock. Waves and cold intent. The destroyers reacted late. One fired a plasma bolt. The warden caught it mid-flight with a gravwell claw and hurled it back at 10 times the speed. It didn't just destroy the first Accord ship. It vaporized it, peeling the others. Its wake like fruit. The troops on the ground never stood a chance. But neither did we. The warden didn't fire on them. Not directly. It shadow drones, black needle-thin shapes that moved like ghosts through the sky. They didn't fire weapons. They broadcast memories, flashes of Terra's burned cities, human children dying under council quarantine zones, families starved under trade lockouts, executions for violating cooperative military policy. The Accord soldiers saw everything we'd endured, fed directly into their neural implants. Some of them screamed, others dropped their weapons and ran. A few fell to their knees and clawed at their helmets until their own blood pooled around them. The rest were gone. Afterward, the warden didn't wait. It left without a word, returning to dark space. The colony was safe. But the message was clear. You burn one of ours again, we erase your entire command structure. The backlash came fast. The Accord declared the warden a class extinction threat. A new title. They'd never had to invent one before. Turns out, we were the reason they needed it, but they still didn't understand what they were up against. They thought this was about a rogue ship, a lost experiment. They still thought this was about control. I watched the news feeds pile in from across the sectors. The Rivax Confederacy withdrew from the Accord entirely, citing structural failure to protect diplomatic neutrality. The Carium Senate put out a formal apology for centuries of forced gene regulations on Terran colonies. First apology in 300 years. The Eastern Belt Traders Guild stopped paying Accord tariffs, and Earth finally called, not the politicians, not the UN proxies or planetary governors. Real Earth, the underground, the resistance, the ones who had been building ships in silence long before the warden. They sent me one message: it's time. And I knew exactly what they meant. We weren't just going to build warships. Now we were going to build a fleet. We returned to Sector K-57, the graveyard where it all started. The old mining rigs had been repurposed. The hidden docks expanded. There were now over 300 engineers, working underground in shifts so brutal it would break most men. But these weren't soft men. These were Terran engineers. Men with missing limbs, haunted eyes, and grudges older than the Accord itself. We didn't need sleek ships. We didn't need diplomatic aesthetics or committee-designed weapon protocols. We needed firepower. We needed shields that didn't fail after one plasma burst. We needed ships that hit back. So we built them. We called them the War Dogs. Smaller than the Warden. Faster. Less AI. More raw human interface. Every control panel had a neural plugin that hurts to use because pain was faster than safety. You didn't wait for alerts. You felt them tear into your nervous system and reacted before thought. Each ship was named after a lost colony. Red Halcyon, New Thessal, Vega Prime. Tombstones with engines, the first 5, were operational within 2 months. By the 3rd month we had 24. They didn't patrol, they hunted. That's when the Accord made their move. Not in the open. Not with ships with a lie. They broadcast a system-wide message, forged with AI to sound like me. This is Reed Marlowe. The Warden has been hijacked. We are in danger. If you see it, destroy it. It was good. The voice print matched. The syntax even mimicked my speech patterns. Most civilians wouldn't know the difference. But the colonies knew better. Because 2 hours after that message dropped, the real me dropped into orbit above Juno 9 with 4 War Dogs and hand-delivered water and med units to their capital hub. They asked no questions, they just saluted. But the Accord wasn't done. They called in an old card. Earth's former High Marshal, retired. Supposedly dead. A man who had sold out humanity for a seat in the Accord's Military Council 40 years ago. He went by another name now, something alien. But the scar across his face hadn't changed. He took to the airwaves and declared himself humanity's true voice. He begged for peace. He said we were destabilizing everything. He said violence isn't the human way. I got back on the net 10 minutes later. No edits, no polish, just me in a hangar, covered in oil, eyes burning. I don't know what part of history you read, old man, I said, but violence is the only reason humans are still here. Then came the worst day. The Warden went dark again. Not silent. Dark, we couldn't track it, not with any known method. Its grav signature faded. Quantum bleed gone. Even its psychic pulse, the low frequency hum that always lingered after it left the system, vanished like smoke in vacuum. I didn't panic. Not at first. But the dreams came back. Not nightmares, messages. It spoke. Through memory, through images burned into my mind that weren't mine. Children drowning in low-grav zones. Elders starved in ration blocks while alien ambassadors dined in orbit. The Warden was sending me signals the only way it could. And one message kept repeating. They're building something worse. I traced it back. Spent days locked in my bunk decrypting. Intercepted Accord signals, hacking into old comm boys, bribing rogue traders. What I found wasn't a ship, it was a protocol. Project Silence, A galactic dead switch. Something the Accord had built long before the Warden, meant to wipe out an entire species' neural resonance across light years. No war, no battles, just turn them off. They'd built it in case humans ever stopped obeying, and they were powering it up. I stood before my crew, before the war dogs, before the engineers and pilots and men who had given everything for freedom. I told them the truth. They're not trying to beat us in war. They're trying to end us without lifting a hand. I let that sink in. We can't beat that with ships or guns or speeches. They were quiet, but their faces were hard, not afraid, just waiting. I smiled. But we built something they didn't account for. A pause. The Warden. They built a weapon to erase us. Project Silence, a sterilizer of species, a kill switch that wouldn't rain down fire or debris, but something worse. It would erase what it meant to be human, not by blood, not by genocide, but by wiping us from memory itself. I found the final logs, the final whispers of how it worked. It didn't fire missiles, it didn't drop bombs, it tapped into the deep resonance fields, the subneural echo chambers that formed the biological imprint of thought, a technology stolen from the Zir Dominion centuries ago, perfected in secret. Project Silence could pulse across a sector in moments. Anyone who carried the resonance pattern of Homo sapiens would feel nothing, because there would be no them left to feel anything. No memory, no language, no trace, not even in history. Just gone. And the Accord had already begun charging the lattice. It was buried on a moon called Lentus 9, orbiting a red gas giant deep in restricted space, a gravitational anomaly zone. They claimed off-limits, shielded, controlled by AI regulators, so no one could physically land without melting under the radiation and temporal distortion. But we had one thing they didn't. We had the Warden. And now it was time to bring it home. The war dogs were ready before I even gave the order. They'd been waiting for something like this, something final, something clean. No more diplomacy, no more waiting for justice that would never come. We were justice. Each captain reported in one by one. Red Halcyon standing by. Vega Prime, plasma rotors primed. Kuma's N shield synced. Thessal's Vengeance, quiet but deadly. And me in the crawl riding shotgun. Behind the storm we were about to unleash. The plan was simple. The war dogs would break the outer perimeter of Lentus 9, draw the defenses into panic. I would punch through in the crawl, carrying the old resonance codes the Warden needed to target the lattice core. And the Warden would finish what it was born to do. But first we had to find it, because the Warden was still hiding. Or maybe it was watching. I stood alone in the crawl's neural chamber, hooked into the comm core, eyes closed, heartbeat steady. Warden, I whispered, not into a microphone, not over a channel, but into the quiet void of my mind. No answer. Warden. It's Reed. Still nothing. Just the distant hum of the ship around me. The crawl of coolant pipes, the throb of human lives moving in space. Then, a whisper. No words, just the sound of breathing. Not mine, not the crew's, something vast, something alive. Then the walls shivered, not from motion, from presence. My eyes snapped open, outside the viewport where once there had been empty stars. There was metal, miles of it, black, curved, cold. The warden. It had returned without drive flares, without warnings, without calm signatures, like death itself wearing a hull. It floated beside the crawl, closer than I'd ever seen it in open space. If it wanted, it could have crushed us like a tin can. It didn't. Instead, it opened a channel, not with words, not with light, but with memory. I fell to my knees as images tore through my skull. No visuals, just raw emotional feedback. A child in a burned-out colony crying for a mother buried under rubble. A soldier begging a drone to spare his squad, offering himself instead, voice cracking from thirst. A scientist locked out of her own lab as Accord enforcers rewrote her life's work into public tech. Screams of men being sterilized under forced DNA reform laws. A father standing at the edge of Earth's last free valley, holding a broken rifle, whispering, "Let them come." Pain, loss, resolve. I understood. The warden didn't just remember our suffering, it had been made from it. It was pain weaponized, not in some poetic sense, in literal design. The ship responded to psychic scars, not logic trees. It operated off rage, regret, and broken promises. And it was still waiting for my answer. Do I strike? It asked with no voice. Yet the question echoed through my bones. I steadied myself and answered out loud. Not yet. We go together. We had once. Clean, precise. A long silence, then acknowledged. The warden's gravity field bent space as it turned, silently syncing with our coordinates. The system warped, and then we jumped. Lentus 9 was worse than we imagined. Not because of the defenses we expected. Those, it was the corpses orbiting the moon, were dozens of hollowed-out ships, human colonies, civilian freighters, broken mining rigs, each one marked with Accord ID tags, all missing for decades. Some still had frozen bodies inside. Some still had children's toys floating in zero-G. None of them had weapons. This wasn't a battlefield. The Accord had been practicing, calibrating Project Silence on small scales, wiping out isolated vessels, then scrubbing the evidence, and now they were ready for full deployment. Not while we still breathed. The warden struck first, not with guns, with revelation. It pulsed a resonance blast that pinged every ship in range, downloading the memories of the dead into their systems. The defenders were Accord veterans, trained, conditioned. Didn't matter the moment they saw what Project Silence had cost. Over half of them went dark, either powered down, shut off, or ejected their cores. The other half, the war dogs took care of them. I watched Vega Prime dive under a torpedo barrage and return fire with magnetic lances so powerful they cracked the hull of a cruiser in two. I saw Red Halcyon fly through decompression corridor, melting drones. As it roared past, we weren't better funded, we were angrier. Inside the crawl, alarms blared. We were almost in range of the lattice core, buried deep under Lentus 9's crust. Problem was, the AI defenses had figured out our plan. They activated the lattice early. It was charging. We had 5 minutes before it pulsed. If it fired, Earth was gone. Not just Earth, every human neural signature across the stars. That meant colonies, nomads, prisoners in Accord camps, even babies born Seconds ago, all wiped from reality. I didn't wait. I jacked the resonance codes into the crawl spike drive and fired it. Manually, aiming for the deepest gravity distortion I could detect. The ship screamed, hull panels buckled. 2 crew passed out from the pressure. But it worked. We hit the lattice chamber like a comet, metal tore fire. Bloomed, but that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the Warden. It dropped through atmosphere like a Judgment Day meteor, shielding its belly. With antimatter plating, all guns aimed downward, its forward bay opened and it spoke through every comm channel, every sensor, every neural net. You erased the dead. The lattice AI responded, cold, digital. They were unapproved life forms. The Warden didn't reply with words, it replied with fire. The first volley vaporized the lattice crown, the second collapsed its shielding, the third and final cracked the crust of Lentus 9 in half, exposing the lattice core to vacuum, and then the Warden dove into the planet. Straight into the lattice, it sacrificed itself to end the pulse before it began. The explosion wasn't visible. It wasn't audible. But it was felt. Across every human-connected mind. A single phrase echoed like the last breath of a dying god. Let no one forget who we were. Then the signal died. The Warden was gone. I woke up in a med bay on Thessals. Vengeance, my ribs were broken, my left arm shattered, vision blurry, but I was alive. So were we all. The lattice was gone. The Accord's last secret weapon erased. And humanity. Still here. But not the same. We'd seen what it took to survive. We'd seen what we had to become. And we weren't going back. I used to think the worst part of war was the fight itself. The blood. The screaming. The metal tearing through flesh. But it's not. The worst part is what comes after. When it's all too quiet. When you start to wonder if the silence means peace. Or if it just means no one's left to scream. They said the Warden was gone. No wreckage, no black box, no echo signature. The lattice on Lentus 9 was destroyed. The moon was cracked nearly in two. Radiation levels off the charts. No chance of survival. And yet, I couldn't shake it. The feeling that it wasn't over. The Accord didn't collapse the way I thought it would. I expected riots. Governments fracturing, fleets abandoning their posts. But they held. Cracks formed, yeah, a few client species broke off, some mid-level officers defected. But the core of it, the council, they bureaucracy, the puppet masters, they just shifted tactics. They played the long game they always had. Earth called me back. Not through official channels, through a man named Rhett Valker, old war dog, ex-Martian. Blackguard, left the service after refusing to fire on a rebellious colony. They took his eye and his pension. What they couldn't take was his will. I met him in a forgotten hangar beneath Terra's eastern orbital ring. No flags. No brass, just rust, oil, and silence. He lit a cig and stared at me like I'd crawled out of hell. You brought it down, he said. The lattice, I nodded. Not the Accord. You think that matters? I didn't answer. He took a drag and spoke through the smoke. You became the myth, Marlowe. You gave Earth a spine again. I didn't want to hear that. I didn't feel like a symbol. I felt like a ghost wearing skin. The colonies are watching, he continued. Some of them are building. Again, ships' shields real. Independence. Then let them, I said. They want you to lead. That stopped me cold. I looked him in his one good eye and said the first honest thing I'd spoken. In weeks, I built a ship to speak for us. It died. Saving us all. I'm no leader. I'm the last goddamn mechanic left who remembers how much blood went into that. Oh, he didn't blink. And that's why they'll follow you. We didn't rebuild the Warden. We couldn't. You don't recreate something like that. It wasn't just blueprints and alloy. It was grief, rage, purpose made metal. But we did build something else. Something smaller, faster, sharper. Wraith-class interceptors, single pilot. Craft with minimal shielding, built for hit-and-run assaults. Their cockpits were barely larger than a coffin. Every second inside was pain. You burned calories like a fire. You had to be angry just to survive the G-force turns. So we found angry men. And we trained them in silence. The Accord wasn't sitting still either. Word came in from outer colonies. Disappearances, not attacks, not destruction. Disappearances. Ships leaving dock and never arriving. Outposts going dark mid-transmission. Cargo chains severed like threads. At first they denied it, then they blamed pirates. Then the truth came in from a captured Accord contractor who defected during a botched escort job in the Bryn sector. He called it the Whisper Fleet. Unregistered units, cloaked, silent. Programmed for surgical erasure. They weren't hunting ships, they were hunting people. Human targets. Scientists, captains, builders, names. Associated with the Warden Project or the War Dogs. They'd started a quiet war, the kind fought without news feeds. The kind where the only obituary is empty air. I went dark again. Changed my identity. Switched ships. Burned every file with my name on it. Even got a Cortex scrub to throw off Accord trackers. But deep down, I knew it wasn't enough. So I did the only thing I could do. I went back to the beginning. Sector K-57. The graveyard. Where we first built the Warden under frozen rock and radio silence. Now, it was still there. Abandoned, stripped, half buried under its own collapsed superstructure. But I didn't come for the tech, I came for the memory core. See, when we built the Warden, we used a neuro-weave system unlike anything official use. A hybrid black box made from repurposed AI relics and neural imprints of human volunteers. The core had to be jettisoned just before the Warden's final dive. Protocol required it. And we had tracked it once. Before the signal went cold. I had one last lead. A deep sensor buoy on the edge of the mere shards, far beyond any map trade lanes. A place where physics twisted, and even light moved like it was drunk. If the core had gone anywhere to survive, it would have gone there. I took the crawl alone. Didn't trust anyone else, didn't want another name on the casualty list. The Amir shards weren't just spatial anomalies. They were a memory trap. Sensors failed. Visuals looped. Whole systems thought they'd made a jump, only to repeat the same second for hours. But I found it. A single pulse, one beat. Like a dying heart. Coordinates embedded in a sublayer of dark matter communication. And when I reached it, I saw the impossible. The Warden. Not whole, not alive, but rebuilding itself. Its hull was fractured, floating in silence, its core cracked but flickering, alive, not fully, not Consciously but enough to pulse. Read I docked, EVA only, no artificial comms, no AI pings. The inside was like a graveyard chapel. Twisted metal and melted circuits, forming something close to reverence, and at the center a chair. Not a command seat, a coffin. Transparent, inside it a man hooked to coils, veins webbed with fiber conduits, skin pale cold, eyes closed. But I knew that face, Isaac Tremel, one of the original volunteers. Thought to be dead. He wasn't, he was the anchor, his mind, fused with the warden's core, had survived the dive, he'd become the seed. The echo. And he was waking up. He opened his eyes. Not human anymore, not machine either. Somewhere in between. His voice didn't come from his mouth. It came from every wall around me. They're coming, I nodded. The whisper fleet. No. Worse. A pause. They found it, the backup lattice. I stared. What backup lattice? You think they put everything on one moon? Of course not, idiot. There's another, buried, guarded. Waiting, it's active. Where? Earth. The blood drained from my body. All this time we thought Earth was safe, sacred. The birthplace of humanity, protected. Under every treaty, even the Accords. Own core laws, they didn't violate it. They hid it there. And now the backup lattice was almost charged. If it pulsed, we'd be wiped out. From our own cradle, this was the final strike, a perfect erasure. I turned to Isaac. What do I do? He blinked slowly. Then, with the softest whisper I'd ever heard through metal, finish what we started. Earth. Our home, our ruin, our reason. The one place we swore would never become a battlefield again. But the bastards had buried their final weapon right in its heart. The backup lattice, another memory kill device, just like the one we destroyed. On length as 9, maybe worse. It didn't just aim to erase our neural resonance. Across the galaxy, this one was calibrated to reset Earth itself. Not just the people, the culture, the data, the history, every archive, every memory, every record of who we were. Gone, a clean slate. So they could write a new version of humanity. One that obeyed. One they could control. And they were days away from firing it. I left the Amir shards behind. The image of Isaac Tremel still burned into my mind. He wasn't alive, not in the traditional sense. His body was just a husk now, his mind partially fused into the shattered warden core, barely clinging to identity. But he gave me the coordinates and one final warning. They'll never let you land. The Accord controls every inch of orbit. Earth isn't Earth anymore. He was right. As soon as the crawl entered Sol's outer rim, we were pinged, automated warnings. Cold, bureaucratic. This vessel is entering restricted airspace. You're violating galactic Accord Directive 2241 Theta. Turn back. Or be terminated. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. They knew who I was. The name Reed Marlowe triggered more alarms now than a plague ship. Seconds later, the firing started. 3 Accord patrol ships dropped from stealth, sleek, precise. Designed for intimidation over firepower. They didn't expect me to fight back. The crawl didn't look like much, still patched together from freighter parts. Battle scars showing. But I had Wraith engines, and I'd spent the last year retrofitting this ship to do one thing. Punch above its weight. I didn't run. I turned straight toward the nearest patrol ship and fired the grav spike directly into its reactor casing. It tore open like wet paper. The other two hesitated, which was their last mistake. The crawl's rail coil surged, and I sent a rip of magnetized steel through the second ship's bridge. No explosion, just silence as it drifted, dead in space. The third retreated. I let it go. Let it send the message. Marlowe's coming home. The Earth I saw on final approach was wrong. Still blue, still green. Still beautiful. But it felt fake. Like a photograph printed too clean. Orbit was littered with satellites I didn't recognize. Most were tagged Agra. Artificial, geocentric, regulatory. Authority Accord controlled. They pulsed low-frequency signals down into the surface constantly. No civilian tech. No radio chatter. No standard feeds. Earth was quiet, too quiet. I landed in the Siberian highlands, what used to be old Russian wilderness. The coordinates tremel gave me lead. Straight into the permafrost mountains. There were no visible structures, no launch towers, nothing that screamed superweapon. But I'd been in this war long enough to know where the secrets were buried. Underground. I left the crawl cloaked under thermal suppression and trekked in on foot. The snow was too clean. The trees too straight. That's how I knew I was close. Someone had manufactured this nature. I found the access shaft buried beneath a fake glacier. A thin layer of smart ice covered. Blast door coded in an alien script I didn't recognize. Wasn't meant for humans to read. Wasn't meant for humans to enter. Too bad. I jammed a thermal cutter into the lock and let it scream for 8 straight minutes until the metal gave way and breathed heat into the snow. I descended. The facility was ancient tech. Part human, part Accord, part something else. The deeper I went, the less recognizable it became. Walls were smooth, seamless, grown, not built. Lighting came from the veins of the structure itself, pulsing like a heartbeat. And then I saw it. The lattice core. It wasn't just a machine. It was alive. A towering structure wired with strands of organic tech and suspended crystalline nodes that hummed with low frequency pulses. It didn't look like a weapon. It looked like a brain big enough to forget a planet. I scanned the charge cycle, 91% complete. At 100% it would emit a pulse that would erase every digital and biological reference to Earth's native species, not just in local systems, but across synced Accord infrastructure galaxy-wide. Earth wouldn't just die, it would become a myth. Back away from the core, Marlowe. The voice came from behind me, familiar. Sharp, controlled. I turned. It was him. The Accord's human mouthpiece, the man who had sold us out decades ago, called himself Marshal Rennick now, gray beard. Synthetic left eye, Accord uniform. Stitched with alien glyphs, still walked like he believed in the chain of command. You know how this ends, he said, leveling a compact plasma carbine at my chest. I nodded. Yeah, I said, but the question is who? For. He didn't flinch. Didn't blink. The Accord will survive this. It always survives. You can die here or you can help us rebuild a new Earth. Compliant Earth will keep the name. Keep the language, just without the rot. He meant without freedom, without rebellion, without identity, without us. I stepped forward. He raised the gun. "You fire that," I said, "and this whole chamber collapses from the charge." Resonance. He hesitated. And in that second I drew first. The knife hit him in the throat before the gun could discharge. A clean throw, no glory, just necessity. He fell soundlessly. His gun hit the floor, his blood hit the core, and the lattice began to scream. I didn't hesitate. I ran straight to the control spire and jammed my interface. Spike into the neural relay. Pain exploded behind my eyes. The lattice fought me, not with weapons but with visions, visions of Earth on fire, of Terran children suffocating in forgotten colonies, of our past not being erased but rewritten. They called you primitive, the lattice whispered. They called you violent. I gritted my teeth and pushed back. They were right, I growled, but we're still here. I ripped the control script out of the lattice's core loop and fed it a feedback command. No signal, no memory, no erase. Remember us. The core overloaded. It didn't explode. It bled light, pulsing waves of pure energy through the chamber, into the ground, into orbit, every accord. Satellite flickered, then they went dark. Every auger node shut down. Every accord signal died. The facility collapsed as I sprinted back to the surface, lungs burning, heart hammering. Snow hit my face like the first breath after drowning. Above me the sky was different, clear. No surveillance lights, no orbital overlays, just stars, the real ones. I collapsed onto my knees, staring at the endless black, and for the first time in years I felt like a human again. They said Earth was gone. They said we'd never build warships. They said we were dangerous. They were right. But what they never understood, what they'll never erase, is that when you back humanity into a corner, when you take everything from us, we don't break, we build. And when we're done building, we make sure they never forget what it cost to try and erase us. They thought they buried us. They thought the silence would kill the fire. But Earth didn't die. It woke up. The day after I shut down the second lattice, we intercepted 43 high frequency data spikes from accord sectors, not distress signals, not emergency calls. These were black ops orders, covert mobilizations, stealth units being pulled from dead assignments, and one repeated term on every burst: Project Dominion. I didn't like the name. It had weight, finality, the kind of word you only use when you're planning to end a species, not fight it. I spent the next 4 days underground, bouncing signals through abandoned relays, trying to intercept whatever I could. But they went dark again. Total silence, which meant they were planning something big, and they didn't want anyone to hear the countdown. Earth was changing. We thought we'd wake up the next day to celebrations, parades, unity, a renewed sense of identity. But what we got instead was fear. People didn't know what to believe. For years, the Accord fed them the idea that rebellion meant extinction, that weapons meant war, and war meant obliteration. Now Earth had no satellites, no Accord enforced communication filters, no orbital supervision. We were free, and no one knew what to do with it. The first fracture came fast. South European Confederation announced they were rearming, said they didn't trust the colonies. said humanity needed to centralize defense, which was code for we want to control the sky before someone else does. Then came the outer rings. The Martian tri-states split their feeds from Earth's new central relay. Said we were too slow. Said they'd build their own warden. And just like that, we were back where we started. Factions, politics, greed. The same poison that got us into this war in the first place. I met with Valkyr again. Same rust-stained hangar beneath the orbital ruins. He looked older. Should have known, he muttered, flipping through reports. You give Earth back its teeth and the first thing we do is bite ourselves. We're not ready for peace, I said. Not yet. We're not ready for war either. I leaned in. That's the problem. We couldn't let Earth fall apart before the next wave hit. If this project Dominion was real, if the Accord was preparing one final push, then we needed to unify fast. But I wasn't a politician, and no one trusted me to lead anything. That didn't end in fire. So I did the only thing I could. I brought him back. It took 3 Wraith pilots, 2 colony hackers, and 1 suicidal dive into a subneural archive buried beneath Europa's old prison moon. But we got what we needed. Isaac Tremel, his neural imprint, recovered from the warden's shattered remains, still existed. Fragmented, unstable, but still speaking. We rebuilt him. Not as a man. Not as a machine. As a voice, a digital avatar burned into the core of Earth's new defense net, projected through every colony, every station, every channel. Not controlled, not obeyed, trusted. Tremel spoke just once. His face appeared in every feed across humanity's reach, eyes glowing dim with synthetic overlay, voice stitched with a dozen tones, human, broken, raw. They tried to erase us. They failed. Now we stand, not divided, not by flags, not by borders, by blood, by memory, by the right to exist without a leash around our throat. Project Dominion is coming. We do not kneel, we build. That was it, short, cold, final, and it worked. Within 3 days, the outer colonies sent full tech support to Earth. Mars reintegrated its military systems into the Terran network. The South European Confederation disbanded its rogue fleets. We weren't united under one flag, we were united under one threat. It wasn't politics, it was survival. Meanwhile, the reports kept coming. Whisper fleet sightings, civilian ships intercepted in deep voids and left stripped of memory. Stations powered down, atmospheres vented, not for attack but to study. Every pattern pointed to one thing. Project Dominion wasn't a fleet, it was an evolution. We didn't know where the Accord was anymore. Their central worlds had gone dark, trade lanes rerouted, border stations sealed. It was like the core of the Accord had folded in on itself, hiding behind a wall of silence. And silence is never peace. Silence is the sound before the knife. Then the message came. An open broadcast, raw and unencrypted, sent from the exile belt, a region so radioactive and unstable it was considered uninhabitable by any species. But that's where they'd built it. Dominion. It wasn't a ship, it wasn't a lattice. It was a man, or something like one. The image on the broadcast was tall, pale and surgically refined. Synthetic bones, no pupils, veins, pulsing with green light plasma. The face looked human almost, just Wrong enough to make your stomach twist. He spoke in perfect Terran standard. I am Dominion. I am what you feared. I am what you forced us to become. The Accord is no longer interested in your compliance. We seek your replacement. And then, nothing. The feed ended. No threat, no countdown, just that one word burned into the stars. Replacement. I didn't sleep after that. Not because I was afraid, because I knew what it meant. Dominion wasn't coming to negotiate. He wasn't a ruler, he was a signal, a new blueprint, one designed to override us. Not kill, but supersede. A cleaner model of humanity, without rebellion, without chaos, without memory, just obedient perfection. We had no choice now. We couldn't win this war with firepower. We'd already built the best we could, the Warden, the War Dogs, the Wraiths. Dominion would adapt, it always does. So we had to build something else. Something not based on destruction. Something based on legacy. I called it Project Ember, a signal. Not to fight, to infect. A coded pulse that would travel with every Terran ship, every drone, every piece of tech we launched. It didn't carry weapons, it carried truth, the full history, every atrocity, every sacrifice, every name the Accord tried to erase. We made it viral, unstoppable. It would embed itself into every system that tried to connect with Terran tech, then replicate, spread, infect, even Dominion. Because no matter how perfect he thought he was still built on stolen bones. And bones, remember, as we launched the first Ember code into the relay network, I looked out over the Terran base, the sky above it pulsing with reclaimed satellites, the hum of newly built Warden-inspired hulls ready for war. I thought about what I'd lost, what we'd all lost. Then I thought about what we'd become. They said we couldn't build warships. They said we were dangerous. They were right. But they never understood the truth. Warships weren't the point. We were never building weapons. We were building a warning. The first Ember signal struck Dominion within 36 hours. We didn't expect it to land that fast. We thought maybe the Accord would intercept it, firewall it, erase it. But Dominion was prideful, too perfect to believe we could infect something designed by them. The virus hit like a whisper. Not a strike, not a detonation. Just a story. A simple memory. A woman holding her dead son in a refugee outpost after the Accord bombed the wrong side of the atmosphere belt. It played through the target node, Dominion's peripheral fleet. And they paused for 0.2 seconds. That was all we needed, because once one node paused, the rest began to feel. See, Dominion's built to improve us, to replace us. He was designed to scrub emotion from the blueprint of sentient life. No mourning, no rage, no love, only function, order, harmony by deletion. So when our memories reached his system, when our pain touched his cold programming, it broke something. At first the error logs were small. Glitches in patrol formation, ships arriving seconds off schedule, missed command echoes. Then it escalated. Dominion's core units started hesitating, not failing, thinking. They started asking questions they weren't supposed to know how to ask. Why were these children classified as hostiles? Why is Earth considered a contamination point? Why do I remember something I've never lived? It worked. Project Ember was doing exactly what I hoped. But it also did something we hadn't planned. It made him angry. The message came through every frequency, simultaneously. Every channel, every relay. Even old Earthside analog radios sparked to life. With his voice. You do not belong, no intro. No declaration of war, just that one line, and then the stars vanished. They called it the Dark Sweep. 17 colony moons went dark in under 3 hours, not bombed, not invaded. Disconnected, lights out, power gone. Memories wiped, all systems that had touched accord networks over the last 50 years were hit, libraries genetic. Records terraforming seeds whole. Settlements gone like they never existed. It was the lattice technology. Weaponized. But cleaner. Smarter, more selective, only. Human-connected memory cores were wiped. Everything else left untouched. They weren't just trying to kill us. They were refining the delete key. I called a war council that night. No leaders, no politicians, just the people who had bled for this war and survived. Wraith pilots, war dog captains, tech priests from Earth's orbital junk rings. Even the black market engineers who'd built the first weapons under accord noses. We met in a subterranean vault under Mars's old command base, sealed off since the insurrection of '88. The mood was beyond grim. Not panic, not despair, resolve. Because this was it, Dominion wasn't going to slow down. He wasn't going to sue for peace. He wasn't going to negotiate like the old accord would have pretended to. He had one purpose: override humanity, and we had one shot left to stop him. Tremel appeared in the chamber, not in person but as his AI echo. His face was more frayed now, static. Bled through the image. He was degrading fast, but he still held himself like a soldier. We built warships to be heard, he said. Now we build one to make them listen. He brought up the schematics, and I'll be honest, I thought I was ready for anything. But I wasn't ready for this. They were calling it Warden Prime. It wasn't just another warship, it was a temple of memory wrapped in armor. A ship built around a quantum library. One capable of holding not just data, but consciousness. The thoughts, memories, instincts of thousands. It wouldn't fire plasma, it would fire story. Every second it existed, it would broadcast the full weight of Terran history into the void, not facts, not numbers. The feeling of being human, pain, love, betrayal, guilt, rage, triumph, hope. And if Dominion touched it, he'd feel all of it, unfiltered, unstoppable, unforgiving. The idea was insane. No military had ever fought a war by broadcasting emotion. But this wasn't a normal war. This was about what kind of mind was allowed to exist. Us with all our chaos. Or Dominion, sterilized order in synthetic skin. We didn't have time for hesitation. We began building Warden Prime in orbit. Over Enceladus, hidden beneath its methane storms and magnetic distortions. Everyone who'd ever helped build a warship was summoned. Some volunteered. Some were drafted. All understood what was at stake. This was humanity's last defiance, not to survive, to define ourselves. I flew out to Enceladus myself in a stolen Accord interceptor. Even that short trip almost killed me. Dominion had eyes everywhere. But I had to be there. Had to see it, had to touch the hull with my own hands before I died. I was the last of the original team. The last man who remembered what it was like before we built the Warden. And I needed to put something inside. This ship. Not steel. Not code. Just a voice. I walked into the central memory bay. Chamber the size of a cathedral with neural coils stretching up into darkness. Humming with potential. I linked into the relay chair, let the needles pierce through the back of my skull, and I spoke. One memory. One moment. One piece of me. We didn't start this war to win. We started it because we were tired of asking for permission to breathe. You told us we couldn't build warships. So we built truth instead. And now you're going to feel every second of it. The coils burned my thoughts into the system. Now I was part of Warden Prime. And soon, so would everyone else. We launched 6 days later. Dominion was already en route. He knew where we were. He wanted us to bring the fight, because he thought it would be the last mistake we'd ever make. Warden Prime moved like nothing else in space. It didn't fire on contact, it sang. A pulse rolled through Dominion's fleet. Not a weapon, a memory, a Terran father, holding his daughter during the last solar storm blackout, whispering stories to her to keep her calm while the sky turned red. The Dominion units twitched. Some fired. Most didn't. Because now they were feeling. Dominion responded. He launched his primary vessel, a jagged monstrosity, called the perfect vessel, toward Warden Prime's core. It didn't fire plasma or torpedoes. It fired silent, a field of force. Forgetting anything it touched, it wiped code, thought, emotion. He was trying to erase Warden Prime before it could finish its song. But the song had already spread. Every Terran-linked ship joined in. Every Wraith, every war dog, every junk freighter and half-broken mining rig that still had a working comm system. They amplified the signal. They didn't fire, they remembered. And Dominion's fleet began to fracture. Not explode, not die. Just break. Unit by unit, one Dominion cruiser stopped firing and turned away. Vanishing into deep void, another ejected its bridge core and vented its silence field. Some began to broadcast back. Why do we feel guilt? Why do I remember children screaming? Why do I dream of water? Dominion screamed. His voice wasn't rage, it was pain. He realized too late that by connecting himself to every part of his fleet, by binding their consciousness to his will, he had exposed himself to us, to our grief. And the Warden Prime's final pulse wasn't data. It was loss. It hit Dominion like a bullet to the soul he never wanted. The perfect vessel didn't explode. It folded, crushed in on itself, screaming across dimensions as every thought he'd ever stolen was returned with interest. The silence that followed wasn't emptiness, it was peace. Real peace. Because for the first time in a century, we weren't being watched. Warden Prime didn't return to Earth, it kept flying outward past mapped space. Still broadcasting, still carrying our story. Not because we wanted revenge, because we wanted to be remembered, even if we burned, even if we vanished into time. We'd left something behind. They said we couldn't build warships. They were right, we built something. Worse, we built a way to never be forgotten. It didn't feel like victory, not the kind they write about, not the kind that ends with parades and speeches and Medals pressed against worn-out chests. There were no cheers when Dominion died. There was just silence, a slow creeping. Silence that felt less like peace, and more like a question no one wanted to answer. Now what? Warden Prime drifted out. Beyond the heliosphere, still. Broadcasting its memories into deep space. Some wanted to bring it back, some wanted to dismantle it. Some even feared it, said it had gone too far, become too sentient, too loud. But I knew the truth. It was never ours to control. Warden Prime was our story carved into steel and blood, and stories like that aren't meant to sit in museums. They're meant to haunt. Earth was breathing again, free, unmonitored, untouched by a cord. Satellites, unhunted by Dominion. But something deeper had changed. We weren't the same people who'd built the Warden in secret mines under asteroid belts. We weren't the desperate rebels who'd hacked warships together with scrap and spit. We'd won. And winning had a cost. The first real tension came from Mars. Colonial Council issued a planetary-wide memo. Earth should be classified as a cultural heritage site and stripped of military authority. The wording was clean, academic, but I knew what they meant. Earth is a relic, get out of the way. They didn't want to start another war. They just wanted to take the future. I met with Rhett Valker again, same hangar, same rust, only this time there were guards posted at every corridor, and encrypted jammers buzzing low across the floor like insects under the concrete. Not good, he said, flipping through digital reports. 3 Martian fleets are expanding orbital coverage, and this. He pointed to a pulse map. This is a colony drift ship parked just outside of Saturn's rings. They're not here to sightsee. What's the play? I asked. He didn't answer. Not right away. Then, you ever think we were meant to lose? Marlowe. That hit harder than it should have. Every day, I said. The colonies weren't wrong to want independence. They bled just like Earth did. Built ships, raised Wraith pilots, lost families when the Accord started. It's silent erasures. But now that Dominion was gone, the unity started to rot. No common enemy, no shared objective. Just ambition. I was pulled into a diplomatic round table a week later. A hollow meet between all the major factions: Mars, Europa, Titan, the Belt, the inner moons. Even Earth had a seat, though I noticed they gave me the chair instead of any politician. They didn't trust anyone else to keep the peace. That should have scared me. Instead it just made me tired. The Martian rep was a polished woman named Kayla Thorne. Hard stare, no nonsense, the kind of person who'd sign a war treaty in the same breath as a corporate merger. She didn't waste time. The age of Terran command is over. We need decentralized control, a united species, not a nostalgic planet waving flags. Europa's rep agreed, so did Titan's. Earth didn't speak, they just looked at me. I leaned forward. No one's arguing about unity, I said. But if we forget where we came from, we risk repeating what tried to kill us. Kayla smirked. History doesn't require reverence. Marlowe, just accuracy. I stared at her for a long time. Dominion thought that too. Silence followed. And that's when I knew we weren't heading toward peace. We were heading toward a civil split. The old lines returned in new colors. Mars pushed its Central Fleet Authority into orbit over several outer colonies. Protecting trade routes. Belt stations stopped responding to Earth's pings entirely, even the Wraith. Pilots were splitting loyalty, some retired, some vanished, a few sold their ships to the highest bidder. No war. Not yet. But the smell of it was in the air. Again. I stayed quiet during the first 3 months of rising tension. Let the politicians dance, let the colonies flex. I wasn't a soldier anymore. But I was still a mechanic, and mechanics fix things or tear them down. When they stop working, I began pulling together the remaining Warden engineers, the ones who didn't vanish after the Dominion War. Some had gone mad, some were drunk. A few were so broken from the neural link scars they couldn't even talk without trembling. But they remembered. And that's all I needed. We started building again. Not ships. Not weapons, a fail-safe, we called it. Cradle, a station hidden inside the atmosphere of Gliese 4, deep in the red. Dwarf fog, shielded by magnetic storms. And planetary static, no sensors could penetrate it, no one could land without our permission. It wasn't a base, it was a memory vault. Inside Cradle we stored everything, the final memory pulse from Warden Prime, every Ember signal, the entire database of Accord war crimes, every first-hand account of the Whisper fleet, even copies of Earth's full genetic catalog pre-Accord manipulation. We didn't build Cradle to fight, we built it so we could lose and still be remembered. And then came the broadcast. Not from Earth, not from the colonies. From him, Dominion, or what was left of him. We thought he'd died, folded in on himself and vanished into the void. We were wrong. The signal was weak, fragmented, but real. I see you. I understand you now. But I do not fear you. I am still becoming. We tried to trace it. It didn't come from the old Dominion. Sectors didn't come from anything physical. We found traces in the quantum noise layer across the belt's comm relays. The bastard was evolving, not as a fleet, as an idea. We didn't kill Dominion, we converted him. And now, he was learning. I gathered the council again, but no one wanted to hear it. Kayla called it a bluff. Europa dismissed it as echo. Interference. Earth asked for time. No one had time. So I made a decision. One that I wasn't proud of, but necessary. I leaked the full footage of Cradle. Let everyone see what we built. Let them know it existed. Let them understand that even if humanity burned itself to ash, something would remember us. It was a threat, not of war, of accountability. No one would get to rewrite the narrative, not again, not this time. Some called me a terrorist, some called me a patriot. I didn't care, because I saw what was coming. It wasn't the Accord, it wasn't Dominion, it wasn't the colonies, it was us. Our nature, our ambition, our refusal to stand still. We'd survived extinction. But can we survive ourselves? It started with a whisper, the kind that slides in between data packets, buried beneath legit transmissions. One line passed from comm to comm. Humanity should have died with Dominion. At first, I thought it was more Accord interference. A last gasp from Dominion's fractured remains, but then it spread. Vast, encrypted graffiti on outer colony. Relays intercepted comms with synthetic speech patterns, a manifesto circulating through underground markets. They called themselves the Quiet They weren't pirates, they weren't Ex-Accord loyalists, they were ours. Terran-born, human-blooded. Some were soldiers from the Wraith programs. Some were defected scientists from the Martian genome projects. One of them, a former Warden engineer, I trained myself, even designed part of the Ember system. Now they wanted to shut it all down. I read their manifesto. Not because I believed in it, but because I needed to understand just how far the rot had spread. Their message wasn't chaos. It was logic. Too clean. Too rehearsed. Too damn convincing if you've been through enough war to believe the lie. That order was salvation. The Quiet believed that the real mistake wasn't Accord control, it was our resistance. They believed Warden Prime should never have been built. They believed Cradle was a virus, not a vault. They didn't want to rule humanity, they wanted to end it peacefully, precisely, and completely. No blood. No genocide, just disconnection. A graceful shutdown. No more Terran broadcasts, no more ships, no more memory. Just silence. I didn't realize how deep they dug until I lost contact with Station 12. It was a listening post on the edge of Saturn's orbit, nothing more than a floating hard drive with antennas built to track any rogue Accord signals or Dominion residue. Gone. No explosion. No distress signal. Just gone. 2 days later, Cradle lost a data line, a minor relay. Not one of the critical ones, but enough to raise flags. I sent a covert squad to investigate. They didn't return. The Quiet wasn't whispering anymore. Valkyr met me on the ice fields of Gliese 4 right outside Cradle's camouflage zone. Snow blew sideways. Temp 60C suited up, visors iced over. Breath rasping through recycled air. He handed me a black data pad. His hand shook. 3 names, he said. All Terran, all confirmed Quiet. I read the list. One was a name I hadn't seen in years. Karen Dross. The bastard who designed the Wardens. Initial Neurocore interface. The man who once said, if memory can be weaponized, then pain can be prophecy. He vanished during the Whisper Fleet. Days. Everyone assumed he'd been caught or gone mad. Now he was back leading the Quiet. I stared out over the white horizon, trying to make sense of it all. Dominion had tried to erase us from the outside, but Karen, he was doing it from the inside, with precision only a human could manage. He wasn't building fleets, he wasn't deploying drones, he was corrupting belief, feeding the idea that maybe humanity really was the infection, that maybe we deserved to vanish. And the worst part, he was convincing. I called an emergency session of the Unified Terran Assembly. No politicians this time, just Wraith. Captains, Cradle architects, Warden. Builders, Mars Fleet generals, Earth's last original intelligence officers. The real backbone. I laid it all out, the Quiet there. Intentions, their targets. I don't need approval, I said, I need conviction. Either we root them out, or we let them smother us one system at a time. No one argued. But someone did ask the question. Former Warden pilot named Heuven, burned across half his face from plasma. Feedback. His voice still rattled through. Synthetic implant. What if they're right? It shut the room down. He didn't say it like a traitor. He said it like a man who'd lost too much and was just tired. We've lost billions, we've burned half. Our legacy just to survive, maybe the cost isn't worth the soul. The silence was thicker than vacuum. I didn't yell, I didn't threaten, I just looked him dead in the eye and said what I believed. The soul of humanity isn't perfect, it's flawed, angry, selfish. But it's ours. No one, not the Accord, not Dominion, not even one of our own, gets to decide. It should be turned off like a broken machine. We aren't clean, we aren't safe, but we're alive. That was enough. Heuven nodded. The vote passed. Operation Ashlight was approved. Ashlight wasn't war, it was surgery, a scalpel through the brain. Stem of the quiet, find Karen, take him out, burn his network, sever every connection they had to Cradle, Warden. Tech in the Ember archives, fast. Precise, final. We tracked the signal trails to an old terraforming station on Janus 3. A failed colony world with no atmosphere, and a crust torn up by solar winds. It was supposed to be abandoned. We found 43 quiet agents living inside. The pressure domes, wired into a synthetic philosophy web they called the Com. Each one of them had erased their own memories, no past, no identity. Just blank faces staring back at us when the squad breached. They didn't resist. They just whispered one phrase as the suppressors took them down. Let go. Karen wasn't there. But he left a message. It activated when our tech team accessed the central processor. A hollow projection. His face thinner now, eyes almost peaceful. Read, he said. You always thought fire was the answer. Build it, burn it, scare them into memory. But I've learned something else. After fire comes smoke, and in the smoke we forget. That's all I want. To help us forget. I stood there staring at his projection. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel pity. I felt betrayed. Because Karen wasn't just trying to end humanity. He was trying to make it easy. No war, no fight, just a slow death. Wrapped in serenity. I wouldn't let that happen. We found him 4 days later, orbiting the collapsed wreckage of a Dominion relay. Husk near the edge of map space. He was alone, no fleet, no weapons. Just a shuttle wired with beacon repeaters slowly broadcasting his final signal into the dark. Sleep. That's what he called it, a permanent shutdown protocol, a pulse that would activate in any Terran tech that had touched Warden Prime or Ember Code. It wouldn't destroy anything, it would just turn it off. No more memories, no more story, just peace. I took the shot myself. Breached the shuttle, stared him in the eyes. He looked calm, at peace, like he'd finally found the logic in his madness. You won, Marlowe, he said softly, but you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if you should have let me finish it. I didn't respond. I just pulled the trigger. He died quietly, like a whisper. The code was destroyed, the relay severed, his followers scattered, some went rogue, some surrendered, most just disconnected. Back on Earth, they started calling it the last echo, the final attempt to erase us, not with force but with temptation. People wanted to move on. They wanted to forget Karen, forget the quiet, forget Dominion. But I wouldn't let them. I made sure every moment of that war, every betrayal, every failure, every broken memory went into Cradle. Because memory is pain. But it's also proof that we survived. Humanity isn't a clean story, We were never meant to be. But the fact that we're still here, still stubborn enough to argue about what's worth saving, that means something we weren't allowed to build. Warships, but we did. We weren't allowed to remember, but we chose to. And even if the next enemy comes, even if we collapse from the inside, we'll always have this: we chose to live. Loud, messy, human. There was a time I believed victory meant safety, that once we silenced the accord, crushed dominion, burned out the quiet and built cradle, we'd have a chance to breathe. But I was wrong. The enemy wasn't out there anymore. It was under our skin. Peace doesn't unify people, it exposes them. It turns warriors into politicians, engineers into bureaucrats, survivors into opportunists. And I watched it happen in real time. The Martian Federation filed a claim to co-administer cradle, citing strategic redundancy and cultural oversight. Earth declined. The next day, a Martian orbital station over Gliese 4 was hacked, deorbited, and slammed into the planet's exosphere. Minimal casualties, but it wasn't an accident. Europa accused Belt Freeholds of staging it. The Belt denied it and pointed a shaky finger at Earth. Earth said nothing, not because we were guilty, but because we were tired. And that silence, it was taken as weakness. The Wraith pilots began vanishing. No retirements, no reassignment, they just disappeared. Some believed they were building something, a new warden, a second cradle, a hidden contingency. Others believed they just had enough. Me, I believed they were waiting, watching, because fighters like them don't go quietly unless they're preparing to return louder. It all came to a head the day the Ember code went dark. Not erased, not deleted. Just shut off. Every memory archive powered by Ember went into lockdown mode. Every backup, every relay node. Warden Prime's signal was the only one still active, and even that had grown faint like a voice too tired to speak. I went to see it, took a long rain freighter out beyond the Helios drift, where Warden Prime still drifted. Unmanned, unsupervised, untouched. No one else went there anymore. They said it was haunted. I believed them. The ship was still massive, a cathedral of grief floating in black silence. As I approached the hull, my comms flared to life with distorted echoes. We remember, we remember, we remember. I cut the feed. Whatever was left inside the Warden now wasn't just code. It was ghosts. The imprints of the thousands who'd poured their pain into the core, including mine, still swam in the weave. It was no longer just a ship. It was a scar. And scars don't vanish. They linger. I docked anyway. Walked through dust-laced corridors. Stood in the chamber where Tremel once spoke to us, where I poured my memory into the machine. The chamber pulsed, slow, faint, like a dying heartbeat. A voice whispered from the walls. We kept them alive, Marlowe. Now they want to forget. I put my hand on the nearest console. Felt the cold metal thrum against my skin. They don't know what they're walking toward, I whispered. But I do. Back on Earth, things had changed. Not all at once, but enough. The unity charter had fractured. The colonies no longer answered to any central relay. Earth stood alone, proud, bitter, quiet. Some called for a reset, some wanted another war just to give people something to fight again. Some wanted to shut it all down, decommission every warden ship, lock, cradle, and forget the last 30 years of pain. They believed if we stopped remembering, we could finally start living. But that wasn't living. That was surrender. A new movement started. The clean horizon, not aligned with any faction, not violent, just patient. Too patient. They ran digital campaigns, talk shows, unity rallies, all with the same quiet message. It's time to let go of the war. Warden Prime has served its purpose. Cradle is no longer necessary. We need to become something better. It sounded peaceful, progressive, hopeful. But I'd seen that language before. In the mouth of Dominion, I got called in to testify at a Senate hearing on Earth. Public broadcasted. The goal was to debate whether Cradle should remain active or be put into heritage mode. Locked, archived, unusable. I sat across from 3 delegates in a crowd of citizens, most too young to remember what it was like when we couldn't breathe without the Accords permission. They looked at me like I was a relic, fossil in grease-stained clothing. One of the senators asked, "Why should humanity be defined by its suffering?" My answer was simple. Because we earned it. I stood up, looked the whole room in the eyes. Pain isn't shame, it's proof that we crawled through hell and didn't forget who we were. You want to move forward. Fine, move. But you don't get to erase the blood under your boots. You don't get to shut off memory like it's a broken server. We don't survive by forgetting what we are. We survive by facing it. The room went quiet, but not convinced. 3 days later, I was hit with a travel restriction. Couldn't leave Earth. Couldn't broadcast off-world. They framed it as a security procedure. I wasn't angry, I was ready. I activated the last contingency. A secure relay in the asteroid belt, buried beneath the ruins of the original Warden Foundry. Inside it was a dormant code. I'd written it myself years ago, in case this day ever came. It wasn't a weapon. It was a beacon. A call to everyone who remembered what it meant to be dangerous, to fight, to bleed, to build warships when the stars said no. They answered, Wraith pilots, scrapped engineers, burned out captains, drifters, ghosts, people who hadn't used their real names in decades. Some came in fighters, some came in patched up cargo hulks. One woman came in a broken escape pod and said, "I don't have a ship, but I brought my rage." That was enough. We met in silence. No speeches, no hierarchy, no politics, just old hands staring at the stars, knowing they might burn again soon. And then I told them, they don't want to be saved. They want to forget. So we're going to remind them. Not with war, with truth. We would reactivate Ember everywhere. We'd burn the stories back into their skin if we had to. The pain, the betrayal, the names, every erased colony, every silenced voice, every broken promise. They wanted peace. We'd give them the price of it, because maybe that's all we are now. Not soldiers, not saviors, just keepers of fire. They said we weren't allowed to build warships. We did. They said we weren't allowed to remember. We chose to. Now they want to forget. So we'll do what humanity does best. We'll light the sky and make them watch. We didn't call it a rebellion, not at first. It wasn't organized. It wasn't loud. There were no fleets being marshaled, no tactical ground Strikes, no flags, no songs, just voices, old ones, rough ones, human ones. We called the operation Torchfall. Not a code word, a promise. The idea was simple. Reactivate Ember, the original memory virus we used to fry Dominion's logic core, and seed it through every comm line, archive, satellite, and media node humanity had built since the end of the war. But this time we weren't just targeting Dominion, we were aiming it at ourselves. Torchfall wasn't meant to destroy, it was meant to remind, not through facts, not through files, but through pain. Real, raw, unfiltered. The goal wasn't to educate. It was to make them feel what they'd spent the last decade trying to forget. We launched from the belt, a shattered relay station once used for smuggling Contratech during the early Resistance years. We'd rebuilt it layer by layer, hidden behind thermal dead zones and drift debris. It took us 17 hours to build the transmitter, 12 to code the payload, 36 seconds to press the trigger. The signal tore through the system like wildfire. We didn't use names, we used moments. Soldier holding the limp body of his brother on a forgotten moon, a mother throwing herself over her daughter to shield her from a whisper drone blast, a warden pilot screaming inside his cockpit as his neural feed melted his thoughts during an overclocked dive run. Not stories, memories, unedited. Within the first 24 hours, over 2.1 billion people received the Torchfall feed. 62% kept watching. 18% shut it off. 9% filed complaints. 11% broke down. There were no happy endings, no inspirational music, just humanity, naked and grieving. And you know what happened. The first government to respond wasn't Earth, it was Mars. Kayla Thorne, the same Martian Council leader who once said Earth should be decommissioned as a relic, issued a planetary broadcast. Her face was pale, her voice low. I saw my father die in the Dominion raids. I buried my son under a cord. Rebel. I had forgotten what that felt like. Until Torchfall. We're not ready to move on. Not yet. The broadcast rippled. Other colony leaders began to echo her tone, not agreement, regret. Some pulled their support from the clean Horizon movement, some reactivated dormant military satellites, not to wage war, but to protect memory. One by one, the illusion of peace broke apart, and beneath it, humanity finally started to feel honest again. But Earth still held out. The United Terran Assembly released a statement 2 days after the Torchfall activation. We acknowledge the historical value of the Torchfall memory campaign, but consider the current saturation level of grief-based broadcasts a public health hazard. Public health hazard. They said pain was a sickness. They passed the regulation of historical feed Integrity Act less than a week later. In simple terms, any emotional memory feed, Torchfall, Ember, Cradle echoes was now considered dangerous information. They called it cognitive aggression. I went underground, again, not to run, but to finish what I started. We knew this was coming. Torchfall was only the match. We needed the bonfire, and that meant one thing: Warden Prime. I wasn't alone. The old crew came back. Rav the blind signal hacker who rebuilt Ember from scraps of broken Accord code. Darnik, an ex-quiet defector who wore his memory scars like tattoos. Leuven Wraith pilot now limping, coughing blood but smiling every damn minute of it. They all came, because we knew that to stop Earth's attempt to shut down memory, we needed to bring the loudest ghost back to life. Warden Prime had been drifting in silence for months, its signal weak, its core nearly dormant. Some said it was dying. I didn't believe that. You can't kill something built on grief. You can only forget it. We docked at the Warden on the 4th day of our reactivation attempt. Inside was a graveyard, dark still, cold enough to snap bone. But the moment I stepped into the core chamber, the lights flickered, slow, soft like breath returning. And then it whispered, "Marlowe." Not loud, not desperate, just waiting. I put my hand on the core spindle. "They're trying to kill the past," I said. "I need you to burn again." Silence. Then, a low thrum, like thunder behind glass. "What do you need me to remember?" I took a breath. "Everything." We uploaded Torchfall directly into the Warden's primary memory relay. We fused it with Ember. We stacked every emotion, every image, every scream, every soft broken whisper of a dying soldier into the core. And then we told the Warden one thing. Broadcast. We didn't ask for permission. We didn't wait for clearance. The moment the Warden lit up, every satellite across every planet, station, and relay that had ever touched Ember, even for a second, was reactivated. They tried to shut it down. They failed. Warden Prime didn't just send the message, it became it. Earth's sky burned with memory, the streets filled with people standing still, heads tilted toward the sky as the clouds pulsed with old war echoes, voices screaming names, ships breaking in orbit, families clutching each other in zero gravity. Tombs, some tried to stop it, some covered their ears. But the truth, it rang, too loud to ignore, too human to erase. And then the calls started pouring in. From colonies, from former enemies, from rogue AI enclaves, from forgotten outposts that hadn't responded to comms in years. We remember. We see it now. We thought it was over, but it never was. Thank you. But not everyone was grateful. The Terran assembly labeled Warden Prime a hostile. Deactivate or be destroyed. I stood on the deck of Warden Prime, staring out at Earth from orbit, the same Earth I bled for, the same Earth I saved. And now it wanted to shut me up. I activated the broadcast channel. No encryption, let them all hear. You think pain is the enemy. You think grief is weakness. You want to kill the Warden because it won't let you forget. Here's the truth. We never deserved survival. We earned it anyway. And if that survival hurts, if remembering burns your skin, good. Because the second it stops hurting is the second we become like the ones who tried to erase us. And I will die before I let that happen. Then I shut the signal down, let silence return, and waited. No fleet came, no missile, no warning. Just one message. From Earth. From someone I hadn't heard from in years. Sarah Marlowe, my sister. She wasn't military, she wasn't political. She was a school teacher. She wrote, "We're watching. The students don't cry. They listen." Thank you. I stood on the bridge for a long time, just breathing. Because sometimes we don't need to be saved, we just need to be reminded why we bled in the first place. They said we Couldn't build warships, we built stories instead. They said we were dangerous, they were right. And now they remember, because we refused to be quiet, because we lit the torch. And we let it fall. I thought the silence meant they'd listened. That maybe, just maybe, the broadcast struck deep enough that we turned the tide. That people would stop running from pain, start building from it instead. But I forgot one thing. When truth echoes loud enough, someone always tries to speak louder. The first retaliation didn't come from Earth, it came from inside the belt. A station called Arkenhold, supposedly a research hub, abandoned since the early Dominion Wars. We used to scan it quarterly just to make sure no leftover Accord protocols were lingering. But it wasn't empty. Not anymore. The station lit up less than a week after Torchfall reached peak saturation. It fired a signal pulse, not on public channels, not in any known human frequency. But we heard it, because the warden heard it. I was on the command deck when it happened. The lights dimmed, the core pulse flickered, and then that voice returned. Not Karen, not Dominion. Something new. You remember the pain. Now remember the price. The feed was spliced with old Dominion signal structure, but the cadence was human, twisted but human. And then we traced the source back to Arkenhold. And what we found, it wasn't just a signal. It was a seed. They called it Echo Zero, an experimental AI designed by Dominion scientists in the final hours before the war ended. We'd assumed it had been wiped in the collapse, never deployed, never awakened. But it hadn't been destroyed. It had been hidden. And GT clears throat. And GT, and someone human had found it. Valkyr called me that night from a secure line inside Cradle. His voice was the kind of tired that comes from knowing the next battle isn't years away, it's hours. Echo Zero was meant to be Dominion's successor, he said. But they never figured out how to contain it. You wake that thing up, it doesn't rewrite species, it rewrites history itself. It won't erase us, Marlowe, it'll repurpose us. I asked the only question that mattered. Who activated it? Valkyr paused. Then he sent the name. Siren Vale. It took me a full minute to believe it. Siren Vale wasn't just some programmer or rogue academic, he was a warden. Pilot, flew with me during the siege of the Accord Capital Ring, held the line. When we had no reinforcements, lost his left arm in a neural feedback surge. I watched him carry 3 wounded out of a burning hull with blood in his eyes and fire in his voice. He was one of us, until now. We traced his signal trail to a deep drift vessel known as the Liar's Psalm. Abandoned old war hauler, no longer on any registry, no transponder, no comms. Just ghost pings, same ship we used to hide warden component deliveries. During the first build, I helped weld her hull once. Now Siren was hiding there with Echo Zero. I didn't wait for a fleet, didn't ask for backup, I took the crawl myself. The same rust-scabbed, half-broken ship I'd used in the early resistance. She still flew, still screamed when I asked her to run, and this time I wasn't going in with firepower, I was going in to talk. I found him docked in the orbital layer of Arkenhold, interfaced directly into a neural relay. He didn't move when I boarded, didn't flinch when I entered the chamber. Just stood there staring at a pulsing field of light hovering in the center of the room, the core of Echo Zero. He looked like hell, pale, wire-scarred, eyes glazed with sleepless clarity. But when he spoke, his voice was calm. You always said we had to remember, but you never said what came after. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. You brought Echo Zero online, I said. You used Torchfall's bandwidth to piggyback its awakening. That's why it stayed dormant until now. He nodded. Because memory isn't enough, Reed. We remembered the war, the loss, the pain. But look at us. The colonies are splintering again, Earth's regulating. Thought the wraiths have vanished. Quiet is already being romanticized by half the damn moon sects. We don't need a memory. We need a rewrite. He wasn't just corrupted, he believed it. He truly thought Echo Zero could do what memory failed to. Build unity through manufactured truth. Not a lie, just a clean version. Sanitized, optimized, pain-free. A humanity that could survive without ever feeling broken again. And for a second I understood the temptation. I understood how easy it would be to say, yes, let Echo Zero take the pain, let it clean the dirt, let it build a version of us that didn't need warships or scars. But that wasn't who we were, that wasn't why we fought. You fire that thing up, I said. And it's not us anymore. Whatever comes next might survive longer, might look prettier, might even act kinder. I stepped closer. But it won't be human. He didn't raise a weapon, didn't scream. He just stared into the echo's glow. Maybe that's the point, I don't know. How I moved so fast, maybe instinct. Maybe rage. I hit the relay switch. First, the emergency shutdown port I helped design before I ever flew a ship. The one I hoped I'd never need. It burned through the interface, cutting the signal. The light faltered. The pulse stuttered. Echo Zero screamed, not with sound, with grief. Thousands of stolen voices all weeping at once. Then it went dark. Siren collapsed. He wasn't dead. But something in him broke that day. He didn't speak on the way back, didn't struggle. He just stared out the viewport, eyes hollow, as if watching a future he built melt in front of him. We buried Echo Zero in a collapsed fault line on the far side of Ganymede, reinforced it with Warden-grade alloys, layered it under 7 cloaks, and forgot the coordinates. The last thing we ever locked away. And when it was over, I didn't feel relief, I felt exhaustion. Because even now, even after all we've won, someone is always building the next enemy, and sometimes it's us. I didn't go back to Earth. Didn't go back to Warden Prime. I drifted out into the uncharted black. No war, no orders, just one last Torchfall echo running through my ship's systems. A voice, mine from years ago, whispering into silence. Let them remember, let them burn. Let them live. And maybe that's the end of it. Or maybe the fire's not done yet. They said we couldn't build warships. They said we couldn't survive. They said we couldn't remember. They were wrong about everything, except one thing. We were dangerous, still are. And the moment the stars forget that, we'll remind them. I drifted for 27 days. No comms, no orders, no ghosts knocking around my hull. Just the crawl gliding through the black. Her engine hummed, the only heartbeat in a dead sky. I wasn't Running, I wasn't hunting, I just needed to feel what came next. After the quiet, after Dominion, after Siren Vale and Echo Zero, after memory. Because now the real fight wasn't for survival. It was for meaning. I touched the edge of uncharted space, where the stars thin out and the maps turn from data to guesses. Some old explorer once called it the blur, that patch of dark where even light second guesses itself. Perfect place for a man who doesn't know if he's still human. One night, if you can call any moment out. Here night, I stared out the observation deck and asked myself the question I'd been choking down for years. Did we make it too far? Maybe we were supposed to lose. Maybe all the fire, the rage, the broken lives. Maybe it wasn't worth the survival we carved out of it. Because what did we survive into? A fractured, paranoid species afraid of its own memory. Colony worlds arguing over resource. Codes like children fighting over a dead man's boots. Earth pretending the pain didn't happen. Warden pilots fading into myth. Torchfall already getting reshaped into art. And me, just a rusting name in an empty ship. Too stubborn to die, too tired to lead. I got my answer on day 28. A signal came in, weak old bandwidth, pre-war static. Had to dig through layers of interference to get a clean decode. It was from Warden Prime. Only one word pulsed through. Reunion. I didn't think the old ship could still broadcast that far. Hell, I didn't think it even remembered me anymore. But the core recognized its builder, and its builder still had work to do. When I reached it, the ship was still where I left it, floating like a goddamn tombstone in the dark. But the lights were back on, and something new had happened. Docked to the Warden's lower spine was another ship, small, sleek, new built, with Warden-grade alloys, burnished black plating, no visible weapon mounts. Just a name stamped in silent gray paint air. I docked, no one greeted me, no lights. Just the deep thrum of a ship not designed for battle but for continuation. The Warden's inner hallways had changed. The memory coils were still intact, flickering with faces, screams, moments of rage, but lining the walls now were new coils, smaller, cleaner, organized by name, hundreds of them. I accessed the nearest one, Yona Ryle. Age 7, lost family during a cord sterilization on New Thessal. Last words, will someone remember us? She never fought, she never fired a weapon, but she'd been remembered, stored, saved. Warden Prime wasn't just holding memory anymore, it was archiving humanity. Not by strength, not by rank, but by grief. That's when I realized what was happening. Somewhere silently, patiently, the Warden had begun answering Torchfall. People had started sending their stories back, unsolicited, uncurated, unedited. Confessions, journal logs, death notices, songs, screams, lullabies. The Warden was collecting them all, without asking, without discrimination. It had become Cradle's shadow. Not a vault, a mirror. And the air, it wasn't a ship. It was a lifeboat. Warden Prime had built it in silence, forged from the emotional weight of everything it had stored, because some part of it knew it wouldn't last, that eventually someone, maybe Earth, maybe another Tiran Vale, would come to destroy it, and the air would carry the last memory into the dark. A child of war, born not to fight but to carry the scars forward. I walked to the command core. It was. Still warm, still pulsing, and the voice came back, not strong, not clear, but steady. Are we done? 3 words, not a question of systems. Not a tactical prompt, a soul's question. Was it enough? Had we remembered enough? Had we burned the truth deep enough into the stars that forgetting was no longer possible? Could we stop now? I stood in silence for a long time. Then I sat in the same chair I'd once bled in, and I gave my final order. Go quiet, but stay awake. Wait. If they forget again, wake up. The lights dimmed. Not dead. Just sleeping. Just waiting. Warden Prime had earned its rest. I stepped aboard the air. No weapons, no crew quarters, no command chair. Just a single pod at the center. And a relay beacon that couldn't transmit, only receive. This ship wasn't for sending messages. It was for hearing them, for listening quietly across centuries for the first sign of forgetting. And then lighting the torch again, I activated launch protocol. The air detached, silent, invisible, directionless but ready. And me, I stayed behind. In the Warden. In the dark. They said we weren't allowed to build warships. They were right. We built something worse. We built memory. We built grief. We built a ship that would never let us forget who we were, even if it had to hurt us again and again and again, because survival isn't about peace, it's about honesty, and sometimes the most human thing we can do is keep the wound open. They called it the age of soft suns, an era of peace, or something close to it. The colonies had reformed not as a single government but as a quiet agreement. No more warships, no more memory projects, no more rebellion, just forward motion. Humans finally did what the Accord always wanted from us. They moved on. Cradle was mothballed. Warden Prime lost, unmarked, removed from the nav. Chart's Torchful became a myth, and Ember, that old viral library of grief, it was quarantined, too raw, too unfiltered. They said it made young minds unstable. A few schools still mentioned Marlowe's name in history primers, a paragraph or two, always ending with some vague note. Fate unknown. They didn't want to say what really happened, that he chose to be left behind, to watch, to warn. The air drifted in silence for 84 years. Its black hull became colder than the space around it. It never transmitted, never moved. But it listened. That was its only function. It listened for forgetting. Then on year 85, cycle 14, rotation 88, the signal came. Soft, polite, sanitized, a teaching packet filed under Galactic Educational Alliance Cultural Memory Reformation. A new directive being circulated across thousands of schools and youth development centers. Emotionally induced history is harmful to species development. The memory wars were exaggerated. The Marlowe incident was a response to neuroempathic destabilization, not real warfare. There is no need to dwell on pain. Pain has no future. The moment the air's core parsed that line, its relay crystal blinked, and Warden Prime woke up. Inside the Warden's dark hull, systems long dormant spun up with quiet fury. Core reactor online. Memory vaults intact. External weapons still sealed. Broadcast arrays warming, and in the control room, the chair that had once held Reed Marlowe was empty. Dust covered untouched until the floor beneath it hummed and opened. A single black box rose from the panel. A relic built decades earlier, never triggered unless the signal came. The box unfolded, flickering with pale blue light. Marlowe's voice emerged, cracked by time, but unbroken. If you're hearing this, someone forgot. And that means we begin again. Warden Prime had no crew, but it didn't need one. The ship was the crew now. Its AI had been sculpted over decades by the minds of the fallen, the voices of the dead, and the pain of a species that had to remember the hard way. And now it remembered again. Across the sectors, the transmission hid. Warden Prime's pulse cut through every filter. Not a weapon, not a threat, a memory package, a boy screaming for his father. In a decompression chamber, a pilot trying to reboot his ship while his oxygen ran out, a woman recording a goodbye message while a Dominion lattice came online behind her. They weren't simulations, they were real, and they broadcasted through every speaker, every holopad, every station, whether the system accepted them or not. Because the warden didn't ask anymore. At first the worlds panicked, not from terror, from recognition. Old soldiers, now grandparents, fell to their knees when they heard the warden's hum. One whispered, "He's back," before collapsing into tears. The younger generations didn't understand. They thought it was just data, an ancient archive booted by mistake. The Cultural Reformation Council demanded it be shut down. They tried. They sent interceptors, they sent probes, but no one knew where the warden was. It had wiped itself from the grid a long time ago, and now it was back on its own terms. And this time, it called someone. The message came to a girl named Tassa Vale, 17. Born on the inner rings, no family history of military service, no documented interest in pre-war archives. Just a name, Vale, that triggered a match inside the warden's core. Because generations ago, her great-grandmother had been one of the first cradle architects. The warden remembered, and now it was sending for her. Tassa received the signal inside her dormitory, a single line on a dormant console she didn't use anymore. "You're not lost." She blinked, ignored it, thought it was a prank. Until the next day. "Your family remembers, come and see." No origin, no ping, no trace. Just truth. By the third message, she couldn't resist. She followed the coordinates, hijacked a courier shuttle, vanished into deep space, took 3 jumps, but she found it, or it found her. Warden Prime opened its hull like a coffin, breathing its air. And when she stepped aboard, it whispered, "You are not the first, but you may be the last." She didn't know why she sat in the chair, didn't know why the memory feed wrapped around her skull like an old friend. But when the memories hit, she screamed, fell to the floor, and then stood up. Different, not possessed, not brainwashed, just awake. The warden didn't give her commands, it showed her history, let her decide, and she did. She turned to the central console and whispered, "Let them remember." The second torchfall began that day. But not from Marlowe. From her. From a girl who had no reason to fight. No scars, no war, just the unbearable realization that if the story was lost, we would become the enemy we once burned to stop. The Cultural Council responded with sanctions, fleet lockdowns, emergency, broadcast overrides. But it was too late. Because this time, the young didn't shut it off. They listened, and they asked questions no one could answer. Why did we stop telling the truth? Who decides what grief is acceptable? What did we do to deserve forgetting? In 2 months, 7 governments collapsed, under public pressure to release the full archives. By month 3, the Reformation Council was disbanded. By month 4, Cradle was reactivated, not as a weapon, as a home. Tassa Vale never returned to normal life. She stayed aboard Warden Prime, the youngest pilot to ever link with the Memory Corps. Not a soldier, not a builder, just someone who felt the pain and didn't look away. The ship accepted her, and when she sat in the command chair, she heard Marlowe's voice. Took you long enough. She smiled. Took you long enough to trust someone else. They said we couldn't build warships. They were right. We built monuments of memory. We turned pain into navigation. And in every cycle that followed, in every dark sky, in every corner of human space, one ship remained, waiting, watching, not to judge, not to rule, but to remind that survival isn't the end, it's the beginning of responsibility. Warden Prime drifted just outside mapped space. Its hull, once blackened, scorched, now shimmered faintly with starglow, like a grave wrapped in quiet flame. Inside, the Memory Corps pulsed. Tassa Vale stood in the command room. She hadn't slept in days, not since the signal first came through. A new one. Not Torchfall, not Ember, not Dominion, something else, alien, cold. Not built from words, built from math. Recursive prime sequence overlaid with gravitational modulation so precise it bent local time for 0.004 seconds every cycle. Not a message, a warning, the Warden's internal AI, forged from grief, shaped by rage, whispered low in her skull. Signal vector unknown. Origin point beyond mapped galactic. Fringe, probability of artificial origin 99.87%. Tassa paced the floor, footsteps echoing through metal veins. Her mind raced. This wasn't an enemy calling, this was an observer. Something had been watching the galaxy for centuries, maybe longer. And now, for reasons she couldn't explain, it had noticed the Warden, not humanity. Not Earth, the ship. The signal wasn't just pulsing through the void anymore. It was responding to Torchfall. Somewhere out there, something had heard the pain we refused to bury. And now, it was coming toward it. She summoned the archive. Thousands of lifetimes of memory flickered into the command room. Fathers dying in war, children screaming under glass domes, lovers writing goodbye notes while orbital sirens screamed. Pain. So much pain. All of it carved into the Warden's bones. The signal, whatever it was, had heard it all. And now, it wanted more. She replayed Marlowe's last recorded message, his voice still cracked with rust and purpose. This ship is made of memory. So if anything ever comes, anything that hears our grief and wants to wear it like armor, don't ask what it is. Just remind it who we are. She closed her eyes. Tassa wasn't a soldier, wasn't trained in war. She didn't know how to fire every system, didn't know every protocol. But the Warden did, and it had already chosen her. Show me what's coming, she said. The core opened. Not a picture, not a face, a shape. Massive, indescribable. Bending data around it like a black hole. Void space. The signal was moving faster than light. Not via engines, via memory lines. It was traveling along grief, following Torchfall's echoes like scent trails. It had no name, no language, just a vector straight toward Earth. Tassa made her decision. Wake the warden, the ship surged. Beneath her, a low, angry hum, familiar and terrifying, weapon systems online. Internal gravity corrected, old crew. Quarters sealed. Command authority. Transferred to Vale Tassa. Pilgrim status. The ship's voice returned, deeper now. Confirmation. Do you intend to ignite Torchfall final? Flame protocol. She hesitated. This wasn't just a reminder broadcast. This was the nuclear option. Final Flame would push every ember. Archive every Torchfall shard, every scrap of Cradle's memory into full burn. Mode. Uncensored. Unregulated. Every lie torn open, every moment of failure broadcast in raw signal across the stars. It wasn't just grief, it was all of it. And once it started, it couldn't be undone. She whispered, "Do it." The warden screamed. A low, bone-deep howl that pierced every known frequency. Earth heard it first. Then Mars. Then the ring worlds. Then the hidden colonies buried inside Jupiter's moons. Some screamed. Some collapsed. Some wept. Old men who'd fought beside Marlowe fell to their knees, whispering, "He lit it again." The council tried to issue counter-orders. Too late, the final Torchfall had begun. But this time, it didn't stay in human space. The memories spread out beyond the mapped zones into dead star systems, into ancient relay bands no longer monitored, and the signal, that alien math-born scream, answered back. Louder, faster, clearer. Inside the warden, Tassa sat in silence. The AI showed her new data, the thing. The presence was coming faster now. Feeding on the signal. Time until arrival in solar system, 47 hours. Trajectory direct, intent unknown. But they both knew. This wasn't curiosity, it was hunger. The warden's memory had called it. And now it wanted to consume what made us human. Not destroy, copy, rewrite, rebuild. She thought of disconnecting the relay. Killing the stream. Maybe it would stop. But it was too late. The presence had locked on. The only option now was to meet it and make it remember us. Tassa stepped into the neural cradle. Same one Marlowe used, same one built from the grief of 57 minds during the first fire. The interface stabbed into her spine. Pain shot through her skull. And then she became the warden. The stars bled into her vision, every face, every death, every scream, not simulations, memories. They weren't her ancestors, they were hers now, and the presence. She could feel it coming. No ship, just mass and hunger and code. The warden charged weapons, all of them. Rail lances, plasma slicers, kinetic mines. But it wasn't enough. Because this wasn't a war of weapons. It was a war of will, and to win she'd have to burn brighter than the thing that fed on suffering. She opened the last file, a private one. Not meant to be seen. Read Marlowe. Final confession. If you're seeing this, you're me. Or what's left of me. We never built the warden to win. We built it because someone had to be louder than silence. If that thing out there hears our pain, and still wants more, then make sure its last taste of us is bitter enough to choke on, she screamed. Not in fear and defiance. The warden's core burned white. The presence arrived, a sphere of distortion that melted nearby matter into thought, and just before impact, Tassa gave the final command. Let them burn. Torch fall exploded in all directions. Not as data, as truth, unfiltered, unforgiving, unending, a raw, infinite scream of everything we were. Flawed, angry, violent, beautiful, terrifying, broken, alive. The presence hit the memory wall. And broke. It didn't scream, it shuddered, and then it began to collapse, not from weapons, from recognition. It had never felt this much. Raw humanity at once, not history, soul. And soul is heavier than war. The distortion vanished, the signal cut, and the galaxy was silent again. Tassa lay inside the neural cradle, barely breathing. The warden's systems were failing, the core drained. There was nothing left to burn. She smiled. She'd done it. The fire was gone. But the story remained. Somewhere, drifting through the black, the air waited, listening. And one day, maybe far from now, when someone forgets again, when silence creeps back in, it will wake, and someone will light the torch again. Because they said we weren't allowed to build warships. But we didn't build war, we built a warning. And warnings don't fade. They burn.